Hey everybody, I'm Joe Killinger. I'm a real estate investor and entrepreneur, and we put these videos together every week to give you all the tips and insights from my experience over the last several years. So make sure you tune in and subscribe, and thank you. Everybody, thank you for tuning in. As we're all getting back to work, retail's starting to open up pretty nicely. Offices are starting to get back here in the next few weeks in Los Angeles. I'm getting a lot of people reaching out and asking about percentage rent, especially on the retail and the restaurants. So I asked George Pino. This is George. He's the CEO of Commercial Brokers International. You've seen him on a ton of our videos. Thank you for coming over, George.
Thanks for having me over.
Percentage rent.
Yeah.
People are asking about it. I'm a landlord, I'm a tenant. How do I make this come together? How do you make this work for everybody so we can all work? Everybody's got a little PPP money and they want to make sure that they're getting everything going so they can maintain through the through the end of the year. How do you advise somebody to approach their landlord or their tenant and talk to them about percentage rent?
Okay. Well, I think what you said is actually very key. Make it work for everybody.
Yeah.
So, with that in mind, you have to keep in mind, and percentage rent can be an extremely effective tool for these times and covering and understanding what's happening because, ultimately, when you are a tenant going to a landlord and asking for a reduction in rent because of COVID issues or whatever issues it may be, that you have no control over, but you expect to have your business grow and get back to where it was, then you have to understand that the landlord also is going to want to see something in return. But you don't want to necessarily tie yourself into tight time frames. I mean, the last thing you want to do is say, I need 3 months, and then 3 months from now say, the sales didn't happen as much as I expected, so I need another 3 months. Because that's just going to get the landlord very defensive and not wanting to work with you.
Well, I just start questioning you. Now, if I'm a tenant and I'm going to the landlord, I want to put a package together to put in front of them. Mm-hmm. What kind of package? And I guess you can't really talk time frames because this is kind of unprecedented. We don't know the timing. So, what kind of package would you put together to put in front of a landlord to make your, to make your lease and your percentage rent look appetizing to them?
Okay. Well, first I would figure out exactly what type of rent is fair on a base rent.
Right.
And this goes to
fair
really
being the key word.
Fair being the key word, but also understanding how percentage rent works because a lot of people don't understand that.
Right.
And typically speaking, percentage rent's been around forever. And we see it quite often, a lot of times in the QSR industry or in drugs, the single tenant net lease, or retail. And essentially you have a lower base rent, and then you have a natural break-even point.
Yep.
And a lot of people think that they're paying base rent and percentage rent on top of that, and that's not necessarily the case. Now, if you're doing well, it will be, hopefully, but that's a win-win for everybody because if you're doing well, then the landlord's getting what is more market.
Yeah.
So typically how percentage rent works is you have a base rent. In this case, and I'm going to use some easy numbers here just to make my mind easy. Let's say it's $100,000 for the year.
Right.
And let's say the percentage rent is going to be 5%.
Okay.
So what you would do is take the 500,000 divided by 5%. That gives you 2 million. So until your sales reach that 2 million, you're not paying
Gross
percentage.
Sales, right?
Gross sales typically. And you can also have specific carve-outs. Like for instance, drugstores. A lot of drugstore leases have carve-outs for the prescriptions. They only pay percentage rent on the sales of the goods that are in the store.
Okay.
So everything's negotiable.
Right.
And but until you reach that $2 million mark, you're not paying percentage rent. You're just paying the base rent.
Right.
So it's really incentive for you to do better, to help out during these times. So they're taking a little bit lower base rent than they would typically get. That's maybe a little bit less than market.
Yep.
But at the same time, you have to understand, coming from the tenant's perspective, that if the landlord's giving you this and helping you with the lower base rent, they're going to expect to have something in return because higher risk equates to higher
Sure.
returns. And at the same time, the landlord has to understand that the base rent has to be sufficient enough
Yeah,
so that it's going to help the tenant, and they're not going to just get it. So, you know, you have to understand that it needs to be a win-win, that everybody's in this together, that there's a lot of synergies here, that, and the only way a percentage rent clause works is if both sides look at it as, well, this is what's fair, and if you do really well, everybody's happy because you're doing well, you're making more money, yes, you're paying more rent, but you are getting a break in the first place. So it's really a win-win for everybody.
And you can make this new lease or this extension any time frame, right? You can just say, yeah, I want to do this for the next 2 years. I'll be back on my feet, and this I'll go back to.
Absolutely. I mean, you typically see it for longer terms.
Sure.
Generally speaking, what you have to remember is that, you know, if you're in a business and you're doing well,
Yeah.
the last thing you want to do also is have to worry about in 3 years renegotiating that lease and potentially having to move.
Yeah.
So, you know, typically it's going to be a little bit longer term, or there'll be options, but you can also put caps on it.
Yeah.
Meaning, you know, and the caps have to be fair.
Sure.
You know, because, and what I mean by that is, if you're paying percentage rent, if you're getting a discount, let's say 30% off of market rate rent as your base rent,
Right.
and you don't pay percentage rent for a year because it takes you that long to recuperate,
Yeah.
you have to understand that landlord has taken a 30% loss in revenue.
Sure.
So you can't just say after a year, I'm going to pay market, because
Right.
that doesn't benefit anybody.
Right.
Until that percentage rent kicks in, you have to understand that here's the option, here's the opportunity for the landlord, here's the win-win for everybody. So you can say that maybe we agree on market rate rent is going to be $150,000. Once I start paying percentage rent, there's going to be a cap. Since I've already taken a 30% reduction, or in this case 50%, I'm going to have a cap at 170 maybe. So I only pay percentage rent at maximum 170 a year. So it's a win-win for everybody in that case, because the landlord's taking that loss for the $50,000 loss for the year, and then you may be paying an extra $20,000 for the next 2-3 years or 4 years. So it turns out to be a win-win for everybody,
Yeah.
and
it
that's the
just-
whole point.
It really just comes down to communication, doesn't it? You know,
Absolutely.
don't be. Your landlord is typically not the evil person, although there's some that I know that are. And the tenant's not and the tenant's not either. But you know, reach out. You might want to have a broker do it or somebody else to represent you, but you know, make sure that you just open the lines of communication, and that's going to be the starting point.
Starting point, absolutely. Things to be aware of as well is understand that you're going to have to open your books to the landlord.
Right.
And a lot of people are concerned about that, but these are unique times.
Yeah.
And, you know, the landlord has to be assured that your business model is viable and going to be successful down the road.
Right.
So they may ask for your sales for the last 2 years pre-COVID, and you're going to have to report sales either on a monthly or quarterly basis going forward while you have percentage rent.
Right.
It's the checks and balances system.
Yeah.
So, you know, you're going to want to make sure that you understand that, and going forward that this is what is expected, this is what I need. You know, you can't go into somebody and ask them for something blindly.
Right.
So, you know, go in, full knowledge,
Be prepared.
everybody's
Business
ready.
plan. This is what I'm going to do to get to these numbers.
This is how I'm going to do it. And also, though, make sure it's fair to you as the tenant,
Yeah.
because you don't want to be in a situation where you're paying percentage rent that is going to hurt your business.
Right.
You know, and what I mean by that is, like, we talked about the QSR industry earlier, and restaurants in general. You know, they typically have, depending on the brand, they have percentage of rent versus sales that they try and hit to make sure they're successful, and it
Sure.
can be anywhere from 8% to 15% depending on the brand.
Yeah.
So, you know, you don't, obviously then you don't want to agree to pay 20% rent. Yeah, you know, it's.
Yeah, you got to be smart about it.
You have to be smart about
And
it.
again, it comes back to the winning
Absolutely.
proposition for both you and for the landlord and the tenant. So But all right, we're running kind of long. So
Yep.
George, thank you very much for coming over.
Absolutely.
If you haven't done so, please do subscribe. We put these out every Wednesday, and I'll put George's contact information. If you have further questions, you can reach out to him directly. So thank you, and have a good rest of your week.